And we're live.
And we are. The Presence Posse is live and with you once again on a Monday or a Tuesday if you're in another part of the world. Welcome to this edition of the Presence Posse Presents. And today we are presenting presence and no excuses. Well, we didn't say no excuses. We just said presence and excuses. You have no excuse to not be here with us in the Presence Posse today. I'm Miriam Siegel, and I have Bobby Cobb and Dr. Fred Blum with me. And neither of them have any excuses either. Although Fred tried to make one, you did actually start with kind of a warning about possibly having an excuse. Something about battery
Hmm.
life.
Hmm. That's a really good question. Was that an excuse? I
You
guess
can
you could
actually
look at.
launch into that right away.
Well, I mean, it might. I think it could be an excuse if like unconsciously or covertly, I was trying to like make an excuse for not being prepared or something. Then you could call it an excuse. You know, it's like how honest do we want to be with ourselves?
This is a
Yeah,
good
and
question.
is there a difference in on the inside? Like that didn't what you said earlier, and we can share what that was. Didn't hit me as an excuse. It hit me more as an explanation. And both of those are labels that essentially are loose synonyms. They're not exact synonyms, but like and the other part of this is in self inquiry. So that's
Hmm.
a good point to use the excuses as a trigger to go, what's going
Well,
on
it's just an
inside?
opportunity, right? Because uh, it's like the whole idea. I mean, this is literally what triggered in me when Miriam says, whatever you said, like, oh, I think you started with an excuse. And I'm
Yeah.
like, part of me, like, part of me goes into almost instant, like, WTF, like, what just happened? But it's awesome, because, and then I go in, like, in my head, I go, well, was it an excuse or was it kind of like Bobby says, was I just kind of trying to say, you know what, I may not have good battery. I was trying to just let you guys know, blah, blah, blah. Um, but then I'm like, well, um, how much responsibility do I want to take for my life? You know? So, like, then it could be an excuse because really what I should be saying is, I'll figure it out one way or another. I won't wait until my battery dies. That's what, I don't know if we told the audience that, but I said, yeah, my battery might die because I'm out here on my phone. So, I mean, I think there's a correlation between the degree of responsibility we take for our lives and our ultimate happiness and power and maybe even realization. So,
Wow.
so I'm, maybe hesitant sometimes, but I'm happy to take responsibility where I can,
Yeah.
you know. So anyway, I mean, thanks for pointing that out.
It was a bit of I was a bit of a light-humored
Of
kind of
course it
comment,
was.
of
I
course,
know.
and you guys know me well enough
Yeah,
to
I
know
know.
that hopefully people watching understood. But it is an interesting point that if we're really gonna get into the responsibility thing about it as well, I mean, we're gonna go more into what is an excuse and what is presence and excuse and blah, blah, blah. At least I think we are. But it's like, okay, if I take this sort of a step further, I know I'm gonna be on the presence posse at this particular time on a Monday.
Exactly.
And I'm going to be on my cell phone or my computer or whatever. And so I need my battery to be charged. And am I
Exactly.
taking responsibility? Right. And so then it's like, oh, well, I may not make it through the whole thing because my battery might not last. And then you start playing with it. Is that an
Right.
excuse or what
No
is it?
excuses. There's no excuses.
Yeah. And
You
then
know.
I'm going to tease Bobby because Bobby was talking about, well, Fred might met this or what this is happening. And I went, are you making it? I was going to say, are you making an excuse for Fred?
It's an interesting word, isn't it? And
Yeah, it
and
is.
it's got so much uh, charge. And I've got friends who I love that will make a commitment with me. And I know as we are making the commitment, there's a good chance that they're going to back out before because it just happens so
Yep.
frequently. And um, kind of the way that I think of, and like the one guy that I'm thinking of who I just really love, he is pure presence. And like, I don't know, and we've never had this conversation, so this is just me being a psychic on the psychic Posse network here. Uh, but I'm just imagining that he's just so in the flow, and he's gone to a lot of trouble to organize his life so he can be that way, and he is, and he embraces it. And the loving thing that, and what I suspect is the truth, is sometimes when I get the excuse, it's like, oh, I kind of forgot that we were meeting today, and I've been out wandering in the woods, and I'm 5 hours from Anchorage now, and there's no way that I can get back. But to say to somebody, I just forgot, like from this person, if he were to say, I was just out here doing my thing, man, and loving life and being one with the trees or whatever, I would be like, do you, baby? I love it. And I'll see you when I see
Well,
you.
but
Because
that's a relative thing, though, isn't it? Because I love
yes,
everything that you just said. And by the way, I can relate like to a lot of that. Like I have organized my life so that I'm not accountable constantly. Like I don't have a 9 to 5 job. I get to coach on my terms, etc. And I love this about my life. And uh, I don't, this is my big thing, that we live in the world, but not of the world. It's like right
no,
out of Jesus's mouth. And so I think that I love the not of the world part. And I can't help but notice that I haven't moved into a cave somewhere to meditate all the time. I've decided to stay in the world also. And therefore, I think that the degree to which I want to be part of the world, there comes some degree of responsibility. Hello, Jan. As as we spoke about earlier. And I'm not bad mouthing this guy at all. Or, I mean, it's wonderful that you have the space for when he doesn't show up, that you're like, it's all good, man. I love you anyway. But maybe there are times when that wouldn't be okay with me also. Like
yeah,
maybe, I'm counting on him for something. And I guess what you're saying is, I don't count on him for much. So that's one way to not have that problem.
I, and it's not that actually, because I do count on him because I love the guy deeply, and when I'm with him,
Yeah.
I'm able to get, I mean, he's so much more like
Mm-hmm.
in the flow of the moment than I am. And he brings me with him, and I enjoy doing that
Yeah. So you count on
so
him to be
much.
who he is.
Yeah. And so part of it's him, that like somebody else, certainly like if it was somebody, that I had hired to come get the snow off my roof, and if they were late, I'd have a very different reaction. So
Exactly.
that's the
Exactly.
self-inquiry part of this whole excuses. And they happen so much, it just seems like a wonderful pattern interrupt and a good cause for a pause to stop and say, what's going on here?
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't expecting that.
I'm going to interrupt the conversation for just a second. Fred, do you have earphones by any chance? Because there's a lot of
I
background
don't,
noise.
but I was worried about the wind. Thanks for asking. I'll put it on mute until I have to speak, and we'll see how it works.
Okay,
Okay.
sorry about that, but thanks
Well,
for that.
thank you for letting me know.
So, hi, Jan.
Hello.
You had some trouble getting in with the link, and you are sticking with that as your excuse, as you said.
That's it.
You're here
I
now.
actually did have difficulty with the link, yeah, but I got here in the end. I think it was
Ah,
more my computer than the link I had to shut down. It wouldn't give access to the mic and the camera.
I love that. Actually, I'm really curious now, because the topic is presence and excuses. Did you feel the need to explain yourself?
No, I thought it was really funny that I was explaining myself.
Bobby is indicating.
Yeah. So, like, just to pull back the curtain a little bit, I was the one that did the tech to get this event. So it was my responsibility to get the link out to everybody. I actually set the event up a week ago today. I've had the link for an entire week, and I just delivered it to the group 5 minutes before we were starting. And only because Miriam said, hey, do you have the link, or do you need me to make one, or what's up? And I'm immediately I'm going, oh God, I didn't do that. And like the excuse factory that is inside my head immediately went into production. And boom, 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 boom. You can say this, you can say this, you can say this, you can say this. And I'm just like hearing it. It's like static in the background. But then all of a sudden I just cracked up. I'm like, how perfect is this? That 5 minutes before presence, excuses, and inquiry, my excuse factory is going full bore. And for me, in this moment, in this mindset, getting ready for the podcast, it's a wonderful pattern interrupt where I can just look and go, wow, just got sucked back in to the programmed reality that I lived through the hypnosis of social conditioning. And, got the link out. We're all here. I screwed up. It happens. I'm not perfect.
It's
And
allowed, Bobby.
and the cool thing is with this group, part of it goes, they'll love me and it'll be a fun, and we can use it as a teaching tool, and it's kind of those almost everything happens for a reason sort of moment.
Boy, that's huge what you just said, though, about feeling like there are people that have your back and that really, may hold you accountable, but you will continue to love you and support you. That's a big deal when people are really learning to truly say, yeah, like you did, like I screwed up. That's just what happened. It doesn't make me a less worthy human being, even though there's probably some part of my ego that wants to use this as evidence for exactly that. And so to have those of us who say, no, it's good. We all make mistakes or whatever. It's just really powerful to have that in your life for any of us.
Yeah.
For me,
it's
it kind of,
interesting, Fred, because one of the things that shows up for a lot of people working with them is, this whole thing of persecuting ourselves and beating ourselves up and not being kind to us. And what I've seen happen repeatedly with people is when they become aware of that and they're, on a mission almost not to do that anymore, they can default into making excuses for themselves then. Instead of beating themselves up, they start justifying it and making up reasons. And, there's no need to do that either. You can just let it be. But it's just an interesting pattern that I've seen pop up from time to time with people.
That's actually an interesting comment. Well, actually, it's all interesting as far as I'm concerned. This either or that we can get into, like a kind of a bipolar way of meeting life. And one of the things that's been happening to me lately is I've been even more and more falling in love with silence. And just really loving silence. And I sat as you were talking and thinking about what Bobby and Fred had said. What if you just don't say anything and just let it be what it is? What if you don't make an excuse and you don't get into self-deprecatory whatever? You just don't say anything.
Yeah. What if?
And I mean, when I consider that people around me, generally speaking, are adults. A responsibility for their own interpretations and assumptions and judgments and whatever, then why not let them have the, well, how am I going to word that? Why not just give them the opportunity to be who they are in the moment? And if they choose to assume and make judgments and interpretations, whatever, that's their choice. And know that I know what I did, so I don't have to justify or whatever. I can just be with that and let it be in the silence. And yeah.
I love that, Miriam, particularly in the context of when people are making requests of us, to do things, go places, be places, whatever. And no is a complete sentence.
It is.
you know,
Yes.
and then silence.
Yeah.
I remember. Sorry, go ahead, Bobby.
I just have something kind of showing up as we're having this conversation that much of our need for excuses and our use of excuses, and like as Fred said, it is the first time somebody does something and just says, I fucked up. What happened? I screwed up. Yeah, I should have known. And the first time you get that, it's like so different and so refreshing and kind of like, wow, an honest person, how unique. And then you can get down the road where if that's happening all the time, all of a sudden you're going to have a new label thrust up. Oh, he's just a fuck up. And there's other people that interact with that person that I was talking about that talk about him very differently. I mean, I do deeply love the guy, and there's other people who will kind of just make offhand remarks that are dinging down. So here's the question, and what is showing up: how much of our conditioned need to have an excuse and to always be fault free? It's like part of our brain is like, make sure that this isn't your fault, is in the care and feeding of the mask that we're wearing of the ideal Bobby, who is a mindfulness coach and is Zen and never loses his temper and never
Only
has
all of it.
only all of it. Yeah, I bet.
Yeah.
Well, because there's a difference between, to use the expression, making an excuse and owning what is your responsibility. In my experience, anyway, and I mean my real experience of the situation. If something is my responsibility, then owning it is so much cleaner, as the word is. What I mean by cleaner is nothing hurts, like nothing. There's no dissonance in my body. It's like, this was my responsibility. I didn't do it, or I made a mistake here, whatever, because it's true. Right? Whereas making an excuse is something complete. It's like almost like trying to deflect from myself.
Yeah,
So,
because we're not okay with that. Because it's really just a question to me of how much I'm identifying as this false self, as an ego, whatever you want to call it. That part, to me, I keep it simple. I say that part is created in fear and insecurity. We create the ego because somewhere around the age of 2, we find ourselves in a world that just doesn't make sense to us. And, there's a whole story that goes with that, but that's the basic idea. And so that part never feels okay. And it always feels not worthy, not good enough, not, whatever, needs to be perfect. So then when we perceive that we messed up, it feels too much like the truth. It feels like it says something about our fundamental worth. And so the excuse, I mean, really even think about it. Like, what am I asking? An excuse. I'm asking you to excuse me. Like somehow I'm giving you the power to absolve me, to tell me, no, you're still okay. I listened to, you guys know who Adyashanti is. He's a spiritual teacher. Mm-hmm. And I'm listening to this whole section recording of his. And he's being so nice and so spiritual and talking about oneness and love. And somewhere on that 6th part, he starts talking about the ego and how all the ego, he said, it's like an alcoholic and it's addicted to approval. And all it's ever saying is, am I okay?
Am I good enough?
Am I okay? Am I good enough? Do you like me? Please, just someone show me that I'm okay. And it was like getting slapped in the face. I mean, it was brutal, this section of it. But that's all the excuses are. It's like I'm just, and it's different, by the way, I just want to say, from being polite, and apologizing. I messed up. I apologize. I hope this doesn't cause any problems for you. If it does, please let me know if there's anything I can do to rectify that. That's not an excuse.
Yeah.
That's just taking responsibility.
Mm. Well, from a psychotherapist's point of view, being one, my general curiosity will go to a person's background or general life situation, even in the moment, where if you tell the truth, you die. Right? If you tell the truth, you are injured in some way. Right. And I remember as a kid, if I was going to admit that anything I might have done wrong, I had the crap beat out of me. I mean, you just don't. Right. So when you learn that taking responsibility and owning things puts your life in danger, that becomes a deep-seated fear and way of being in the world. And just because we grow older and move away from home or whatever that situation was, or maybe we are living with someone who does harm us, because there are a lot of people who have violent partners or whatever. But when you no longer live in that situation, where you grow up and you move away, that just doesn't disappear. It's like I moved away from home, but I still am that person in my brain. And I haven't necessarily made the connection that I'm not in a war zone anymore. And a lot of the times in any kind of therapy or coaching, I have to bring that up. It's you're not there anymore, right? Like that you're not the same person. When you were a kid, you didn't have any defense for these big people who had to keep you alive, but you're now a grown-up, much bigger. That wouldn't happen. For example, bringing in situations to orient them to what is now, right? It's like you are not in danger. And even in a therapy room, people can go into
Fight or
black
flight.
wax or anything like that, and they're really scared. And it's like, okay, but you and I are actually just sitting here in a room talking. You feel like something else is happening, but if you look around, nothing matches what you feel, right? This is a quiet room with just the two of us talking. There is no threat. And it can take some time before, I mean, I know you guys talk about ego. That's conditioning for me, and that's survival, it's survival conditioning. I cannot tell the truth. I cannot take responsibility, or I'll die. And once that's in there as a pattern, it can take a while to understand that I actually can say scary things, and it's okay. Yeah, maybe somebody will get upset, but that's the worst that happens. Somebody may feel anger towards me and express that in a maybe not so very healthy way or pleasant way, and I'm still okay. Right.
And if they're in an actually dangerous situation,
yeah,
they've got other priorities to figure out first.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a completely different thing. Although sometimes, and that was one of the things I had to learn, a lot of those situations are no-win situations. So it almost doesn't matter what you say, because they're going to hit you anyway, because that's what they want to do. Right. And then in that case, I may have to make a split-second decision for my own soul. Right. If I'm not going to win anyway, I may as well tell the truth. And that can be really, really scary. It can be as scary as just challenging the ego when there is no real danger. It can feel exactly
It's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's the
and
same
this is like
thing.
for people who are watching, and you're welcome to share your experiences, but just that feeling of the need to make some sort of excuse is an invitation to look more closely at what's going on with you.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes, again, your safety has to be the first priority, but, hopefully and thankfully, we don't find ourselves in that position very often. If you do, please, you're watching this, please get appropriate help. But assuming that that's not the case, I mean, it is my belief that life offers us endless opportunities to sit with whatever aspect of the ego has come to the surface in this moment. And just to be present with that is everything. It doesn't really get any simpler than that. Yeah. You just be with what's happening right now. And if we can do it skillfully and with presence, it just becomes a doorway. Life is endlessly benevolent in that way, I think.
I agree, Fred. And I think, the more we develop our awareness and notice the urge to make an excuse, that is the doorway for inquiry. And,
Yeah.
what purpose do I want to make an excuse? What does it serve? For what benefit? What does it do for me? Am I trying to protect my own self-esteem here? Or am I trying to keep myself motivated by telling myself I can do something I haven't done? Sometimes it can be to keep yourself in a relationship or to preserve a relationship, or we might make excuses for other people because we don't want
Right.
family to think bad of them, or friends, or so it's really helpful to do that inquiry. And sometimes it's just to take us out of overwhelm or panic in the moment, but unless we actually do the inquiry, then we don't allow it to rise up and move through us.
Where do I feel it in my body? How do I
Yeah.
experience it in my body?
Yeah,
That's my favorite part.
yeah, yeah.
And just so, I mean, we're not, well, I'm not going to speak for you guys, but in my in my case, sometimes things take me a while. Like, I'll, for example, it used to be pretty much a knee-jerk reaction for me to try to make some excuse, because I was generally of the impression that my life was in danger basically all the time. So it would hit me afterwards, like, oh, why did I say that? And instead of doing that, which is like a self-berating, oh, you idiot, why did you say that? Then I got real with it. Why did I say that? Because there's I can choose to beat myself up for something I can't change. What's the point? Or I can actually get curious and interested about what was it that had me saying what I just said? What did I think was happening? What did I think was going to happen? Was any of that real? Is there something I can do instead if I'm in a similar situation another time? And start informing myself and changing. Sometimes it happens after the fact. And in my case, the more I do that kind of thing, the more it becomes that, okay, it's happening as I do it. And then after a while, it doesn't happen at all, pretty much, because I don't need it anymore. I understand that I'm generally safe in the world. And it is also my choice to look at my life situation in that way. So just so for the people who are watching, if you feel frustrated, yeah, but I've tried and it doesn't work for me, keep trying. It's training. It's
And
practice.
get support.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. It's hard to see ourselves sometimes. And, what you're doing, yes, 100% what you're describing, Miriam. And if someone lives in like almost continual fight or flight, it's going to be really hard to do that until they learn how to breathe, maybe, or there's something fundamental that they need, that they can get into that self-inquiry, self-reflective state. But and then still, it's really good to have help,
Yeah.
someone that can reflect back to you or ask you questions that your ego has cleverly hidden from you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wouldn't be without a coach at any point in time. Different people for different things at different times, but we all have blind spots, and it's so much easier to see things in other people, but so much harder to see it in yourself.
Well, I've always felt like, the greatest exponents of whatever it may be, whether it's sports or music or acting, Michael Jordan always had a coach, and it's highly unlikely that he had that coach because the coach was a better basketball player than him. So there's other, but the coach could see things that could help him become even better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. So are we all on the same page as far as what excuses are? Because we never really got around to saying, we've given lots of examples, and we seem to be in agreement. But also an excuse, are we generally considering an excuse to be, I really hesitate to use the word, but something not unnecessary or negative?
I wouldn't call it negative. Go ahead, Bobby.
I wouldn't either. And I'll let you
That's
finish
why I
because
hesitated.
I wouldn't either because I think they're useful. They can be a valuable tool. I think on one level they are necessary. Like, my friend that I'm talking about, but not mentioning his name, there's no need for him to ever give me an excuse. So any excuse that he gives me is superfluous. But to the degree that, like, excuses are like a napkin that we wear over our clothes so we don't spill food on our suit. But this case, it's the egoic suit of, the mask that we're showing the world. So they're necessary to the degree that you're involved in that game, and they're
Beautiful.
useful to us to be able to go, okay, wow, my urge right there was to make something up, to create something, or to rationalize, or to give an explanation, or whatever it was. And there were credible ones that I could use, but in me, in the context of getting on this show, it was just like, oh, what's going on here? Stop for a second and pause. And I just saw it differently. So Jan talking about, and Fred, all of us talking about the benefit that the coach is, it's that shift in perspective and perception of being able to see things a little bit differently than we see it, just looking out and not seeing our head but seeing everybody else's head. And so it can be an indication that, hey, you're still playing your game, you're still hanging on to the mask, you're still letting conditioned egoic responses run the system, and there is another way. You can pause. And I think from that standpoint, just playing around with this in the past week, every time excuses for me, both hearing them given to me and offering them to others, have just been a nice little cause for a pause, to just sit and reflect. Okay, what's going on? Where am I right now? And it just brings me within, sometimes just like, oh, I'm fine and this is good and I don't need to say anything. Silence is fine. Boom, I rumble on. And sometimes it's like, ooh, there's some wiring there that I haven't explored before. There's some conditioning that perhaps I ought to revisit, maybe.
And that's
And
good news.
yeah, it's all. So I'm more recently I've been like attempting to eliminate good versus bad from my own vocabulary and my own thinking, and think of more useful versus unuseful. Because, anger on one level is bad, but on another level, it's a wonderful teacher. And you can see what triggers you and where does your anger arise, and it's a wonderful catalyst for self-reflection and inquiry.
Mhm.
So they're not bad. You just got to kind of see them for what they are.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to bring
Some,
a moment because, sorry, Fred, for just a
go ahead.
second. You, when I hear you talk, Bobby, you mentioned sort of like this, when it hits you, and that wasn't your words, but I notice that, generally speaking, that moment where people are able to suddenly realize that, oh, I'm making an excuse now, or oh, I was going to make an excuse, that moment they feel safe.
Hmm.
Because if the fear is there and controlling, it's very difficult to see anything other than saving oneself, right? Anything other than solving whatever the fear problem is, right? But the moment you notice, just for a split second, that I'm actually not in danger right now, that's when the thought can come in, or the understanding can come in. I don't need to do this, or I can maybe do something. And a lot of what I think all four of us do is helping people, in some respect, helping people to get to that split second and prolonged seconds and minutes and months and whatever, where it is, I feel safe.
Yeah.
So I can be present to whatever is there, including what's going on in my own head.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
And I would actually offer just consider a small flip. It's not that you are, because you're feeling safe, you're allowed to be present. That is one way of looking at it. But I would suggest it's because you came into presence, you realized you were safe in this moment. And, some of that background static might just kind of quiet down.
See, like he chicken and egg you there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I did.
I really like that though, Bobby,
I'm a
because
chicken and egger from way back.
Bobby, there's a comment. There's a comment you might want to put on the screen.
Oh, thank you.
I'll say this real quick while he's getting the comment.
Thank you.
Or we'll look at that first since it's already
Yeah,
given.
exactly right.
The lines of persists. Wow, nice.
That which
Well,
will
thank you,
persist will
Facebook user.
persist.
yeah,
We don't see your name, unfortunately, because
We
you have to write
suspect
it.
it's Rosalie.
Very well could be
Rosalie.
Rosalie. Except usually we know it's Rosalie, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe she didn't log into Facebook today. Whatever.
I was going to say,
And
it just
StreamYard, I mean.
kind of struck me as funny along the lines of all these things around excuses. Is have you ever had like a really good excuse? Like a completely out of my control, like the plane was late excuse kind of thing, Doesn't it feel really good in a certain way? Like, no, like really, I'm not the, like you feel so defended against anyone seeing what a loser you really are. You know what I mean?
It's like
It's,
you're insulated.
yeah.
You're wearing bulletproof
It's like
Kevlar
really,
armor that
yeah,
yeah.
really for sure this time it's not because of my unworthiness. I
No,
really
exactly.
couldn't help it, So it's just interesting. I
Wasn't
guess
me.
it's like that really feels kind of good somehow. Sometimes it
That's-
doesn't.
That's
Rosalie.
Rosalie going
That's
through
Rosalie.
my next.
Well, now we know it's you, Rosalie.
Or we think we do anyway.
Yeah,
Okay, is that an excuse? That's an excuse.
That's an excuse. Yeah. We'll have none of those, Rosalie.
It's like a horror movie. The
We got
excuse
you,
that wouldn't
Rosalie, and
die.
making excuses for not.
To your
I'm
point,
not your name.
Fred, it's not Rosalie's fault. It's StreamYard.
No, and we love her no matter what. No matter what. Oh yeah, I mean, I remember one time. This is along the same lines. I was out walking my dog, and I used to live next door to this senior center, and they were putting a sign in the grass, "Happy 80th birthday, so and so." And I had this very brief chat with the person. Yeah, my mom at the time, she was like 88 or something. I said, yeah, blah blah blah, and it was just very nice, 45-second friendly chat. But I'd been like on this deeply meditative walk, so I was a little bit of the static was gone. And after I walked like past them, I swear there was a part of me that almost audibly said, I just survived another interaction with other humans. It was like, whew, they didn't see me. The shield
Under the radar there.
And it was so fascinating to see like how the ego is just always doing that. But when we see it, as like so many people have said today, when we can see it and we can just be with it exactly as it is, the mental aspect, the belief, the physical, whatever part of it we connect to, it is such an opportunity. It is just like that's where freedom lies in this moment on the other side of whatever it is we're resisting. It's so easy. I mean, not easy, simple, not easy, I say.
But being with it, that's a beautiful thing, and it's a very important thing. It's not acting on it, it's being with it.
Correct.
In other words, I
There's
can have
nothing to
all that
think.
stuff going on, and I know I'm listening to my head or whatever. I'm just not really paying attention. It's not, I'm not going to do anything.
Yeah, that ain't it.
Yeah.
No, it's like, I think and we're all talking about this, right? I think perhaps, I don't want to say it's a gift that we give, like we own it, but to somehow help people to just be okay with their experience in this moment, to just be with it, to embrace it, And if it means I feel guilty because I didn't, whatever, I messed up. If you could just be with that, and then you can say, like, without any baggage, I screwed up. I'm sorry. Or like Jan says, just no. I still don't think I can do that one, by the way, Jan. Like, I pretty much have to say, no, I can't. I have someplace else to be,
I'm not
Fred,
good at it either, but it's a work in progress for me. But
Yeah,
I know people that are really good at it. Like I'll
yeah,
ask people, "Can you do something?" No, sorry.
yeah. It's
That's
awesome.
it. Like, and there's
that
no
sounded
room
very
for
Canadian. You say
why.
sorry.
It's just no. Um, but when I was listening to, I was going when we were talking about definitions earlier. I was going to say like there's so much wisdom and intelligence in excuses, and I think Bobby, you described it beautifully. In terms of the benefits of having excuses. But the other thing that you said that I really liked, and because we've all talked about it really in terms of having somebody to work with. When I first came across the three principles, I was an NLP coach, and I thought like threw the baby out with the bathwater and kind of go, oh, who needs tools and techniques and strategies and don't need those anymore, and they're only a distraction. But what I've come to see is that when you're working with another person, it doesn't really matter what they're doing with you, whether they're doing breathing with you or NLP or asking questions. The very fact that somebody distracts you from your own preoccupation, basically, and takes you in another direction, whether that be breathing or inquiry or whatever, that alone can help the mental static to come down a level. And I think our job as coaches is just, whatever our intervention is, it's when people drop their own thinking, whether it's to work on an NLP tool or technique or anything else, that an insight can come in. And I used to think it was the tools that did the heavy lifting, but I've come to see that it's not. It's just that space that we create for people to be with whatever is going on in that moment and make it okay in whatever way we do that they just kind of go, and suddenly something new. It can be that simple.
Yeah, and maybe not even that. Like it
Yeah, and
always.
maybe not even that. Yeah, maybe that's what's complicating it.
Yeah, but I get it. I mean, it's like that's definitely a layer. It's not the tools; it's just the presence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you can have tactics and they're fine, but without understanding behind it, they don't work. But with understanding, they can be really helpful.
Right.
That's the point.
Right. Yeah, it's not to say there's anything wrong with them. Exactly.
Yeah. And sometimes you just need to keep practicing, and then the understanding shows up.
Yeah.
It's kind of like I can ride a bike and I can't. There's no way I can ride a bike, and then all of a sudden, oh, I know what balance is. I know how to balance this. But before, it's like, well, whatever. Yeah. But you gotta, okay, I'm gonna have to keep oversteering until I figure it out. And all of a sudden, well, that's what was missing. I had no idea. Yeah.
You're right. It's right. It's a skill. Is all it is.
Yep.
It's a skill that you practice and you get better at. And whether you call it self-awareness or self-inquiry or whatever, you're just building neural pathways in your brain.
Right.
You learn at some point in life, you learn to eat with a fork. At first, it was really hard. So, you'd miss your mouth and all kinds of stuff. And now we do it most of the time. I get it right. And
Fred, earlier you were talking about, the ego that kicks in when we're about 2 and we suddenly have to protect ourselves. Isn't it fascinating how, we learn to walk and talk and get around and use a fork, and we do all that through experiential learning and listening to our inner guidance. And then suddenly somebody comes along and says a crossword to us. We just walk away from all that.
That's that joke, right? The joke, I may have even told this before. The man gets into an argument with his wife, and so he goes into his meditation room, and he's got this beautiful altar with pictures of the saints and crystals and whatever. And for like 20 minutes, he sits in lotus position and he is at peace with creation. And then he opens the door to his meditation room and she's still there. It's like, can
That's
you
not
carry
okay.
that into the world or not? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Bobby,
it's
you
so
were going to
cool.
say something?
Me, I was thinking of the bike example, and what a wonderful metaphor that is. Because if you think about it, the one thing that is essential to being able to ride a bike is balance. And if you don't have that, all of the other strategies of, lean into the turn and, don't brake and try to turn at the same time. And there's lots of things that can make you a rider. But if you don't have the balance down, all of those are irrelevant. That is what is essential to riding the bike. And how do we get people to be able to do that? They have to, inside of themselves, create those neural networks that get them a little closer, a little closer. We use training wheels, and then we raise those training wheels an inch or two every week or 2 weeks or whatever the time frame is. And then all of a sudden, there's that moment. And I remember it with my son. I'm like, I think we're ready to take your training wheels off, buddy. And he goes, oh, no, I'm not ready for that. And I'm like, Logan, we just rode around the block and your training wheels never touched once. Let's do this. I'll run alongside with you. And, his intellectual understanding had not yet caught up with the fact that he's got this. And so there was a little bit of a lag there. But in like those neural networks are so important that we need to build those. And that's part of the process that, when we're learning to walk, it's the same thing. A little kid, is doing this balance dance that's really cool. And then one day they don't need it. It's just, and it clicks in an instant.
Well, it's like walking on a 12-inch wide piece of wood, like long plank that's on the ground,
effortless.
And now take that same 12 inches and put it 30 feet up.
Scary as shit.
And, when we're assuming it's not wobbly or anything, it's exactly the same.
Same, yeah.
Yeah.
The only thing that's different is the mental static.
Correct.
Yeah, the clarity. Well, I love this as a topic, and to me it's so cool to be able to watch as we get to the point where we can both be in the world but not of the world. To me, when I hear you say that, Fred, or when I read Jesus's quote or whatever, in my mind, actually, I do kind of attribute that to you now.
That is way too much pressure. Thank you very much.
You need to make up some excuses now.
I remember. All right, fine. Please continue.
Yeah, but just that as a trigger. I did a thing yesterday. We do a new moon ceremony. Yesterday was the new moon. And my job was, we had a person that was leading this cacao ceremony. And my job was to like till the soil and get them ready for that. And it was all about that. And I told a story in which anger arose in me, and it just it arose, it showed up, and I just welcomed it to the proceedings, and was just kind of talking around that no expectations, judgment free for this ceremony. And afterwards somebody comes up and says, I can help you with those anger issues. And like in the context of that conversation, I'm like, what are you talking about? And they said, you said you had anger issues. And I said, when did I say that? And it's like in the thing. And thankfully, or interestingly anyway, I was in the middle of doing something else and I did not have time to continue the conversation. It might have gone differently. I had to leave. I'm like, we'll talk about this later. And then as I replayed it, I'm like, oh, I did mention anger in that one point. And he heard anger issues. I was using that as a thing that said anger can arise. You just don't need to serve it tea. You don't need to have a conversation with the anger. You don't need to breathe life into
You
the
don't need to give
anger.
it center stage.
Yeah, but the cool thing about it in that experience for me, and I think what's applicable to our podcast, is that interrupted my pattern. That got me stopping to listen to the story that was going on in my head, because this was after the event. So I was reviewing the event and I'm thinking about what could we have done differently and how was it received and what worked and didn't work, and doing that kind of analysis that you do. And so I was time traveling back in a useful way. And then boom, that pattern interrupted me. And I'm like, okay, what's going on here? Because I felt myself, it did kind of, it popped up a little irritation that he was talking about my anger, because my ego doesn't want people to know I ever get angry, because I'm a mindfulness coach. Me, divine I am, infinite mind, knows anger arises all the time, and it's not good or bad. It just shows up. Sometimes it has messages, other times it doesn't.
I
Sometimes I
hate when
act on it.
someone.
Most of the time I don't. And
I
so just
hate when someone. I'm sorry. Please continue.
yeah, uh, and just I would just invite people who are listening to this to just maybe change your relationship with excuses,
Mhm.
and instead of throwing them out to keep you protected in your tribe, in your community, and to keep the mask pristine and unblemished, instead of going without, go within and say, okay, wow, okay, I'm about to make something up, or I'm about to exaggerate something, or you know and maybe that's the definition, the difference between an explanation. I'm sorry I'm late, I got hit by a car, and I had to wait for the police and the tow truck, and I couldn't make it, versus some other thing that you just make up. And there's a slight difference there, it feels like.
Have you ever seen the movie Whiplash?
I don't think so, no.
It's a really good movie about this kid he's in a college program, musicians program, and he's a drummer, like a snare drummer in a jazz band. And the teacher, who's that guy, the bald guy that does the farmers commercials, I can't remember his name, but really good actor.
Okay. And he won an Academy Award for that, or was
Right,
nominated,
I think
right?
he did.
He was
He's
like a
just
real hard ass. I've never seen that movie, but I know the movie.
unbelievably tough on these kids, these musicians, like abusively tough, many people would think. And at one point, this kid is like supposed to be in this performance, and he's so freaked out that he gets into a car accident on the way there.
On
And like
purpose?
his car is totaled, and he's banged his head and he's bleeding. And all he could do is he grabs his notes and he limps like a half a mile to the thing. It's like
Wow.
he's so terrified to not make it on time, But it's like,
No excuses, huh?
exactly. It's like, but it's such a great metaphor, because it's like that's how it feels sometimes, Like I have to keep this covered. They can't know.
Yeah.
And then the other thing I thought of a moment ago was I'm reminded of that beautiful Japanese pottery. I think, is it called Reiku or Raku? Eric, where they keep the cracks are part of it. The imperfections are the beauty. In fact, they pour silver or gold into the cracks.
Wabi sabi.
Yeah, that's what I know it is, wabi sabi.
It's just so it's such a beautiful metaphor, really. It's like we're going to, like, what appear to be your flaws are actually the beauty in you.
In you, yeah.
They're your strength. They're even your opportunity to awaken, as we've been saying here. And it's just as Bobby is suggesting, such a different relationship to all of it. It's not easy.
No, I'll tell you a funny story, seeing as we're talking about cars. Myself and my hubby, we ordered a new car last year, and it finally arrived at the end of January.
Congratulations.
Thank you. An electric car, and we hadn't had one before. And we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for it to arrive. And all the time, Christy's getting more and more excited. And, I can't believe I'm going to have such a powerful car. And, Googling all these YouTube videos and talking about every feature and everything it could possibly do. So we get to the dealership anyway. And it's my car, by the way. I'm buying the car.
Really?
question. So I get into the car and I get up the road about 50 meters, and my entire body started shaking and trembling, and I had to pull over. And I was like, I can't drive this car. I just can't drive this car. Please don't make me drive this car. And I just had a meltdown. And my
Wow.
husband's looking at me and he's going, who are you?
Yeah, right.
It's like, who are you? But as Bobby was saying, it just played out in front of me. This car is worth more money than any car I've ever driven. This car is bigger than any car I've ever driven. This car is too powerful for me. I'm afraid I'm going to be I don't feel in control. But it just, because I took the pause and pulled over, I had to because I was shaking. I actually saw the whole story play out in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which is such a gift.
It was a huge gift. And I didn't pull away that day, but by the time we got home, I got into the car and just went for a drive, and I was absolutely fine. And I've been fine since. But there was a story playing out in my head, and I think it was, I don't know why it was, but my theory is it was because I was listening to him for 12 months going on about all these powerful things this car could do, and somehow I had scared myself in the process. It's just such a silly thing, but it's all right now. I'm good and the car is good. We both survived.
That's a brilliant story.
Yeah.
And the whole
Well, it
ability
surprised me
to
even that it was
see,
happening.
yeah, and give yourself time, because again, I mean, we're talking about excuses in that split second where you understand that you actually are safe, or that where you actually can balance the bicycle or whatever. Sometimes you actually need to calm down for a while.
Mhm.
Or like
Right.
we talked about, sort of looking at it afterwards and reflecting on the situation and what was really going on with me, and do I really need to have that thought process or that reaction? No, I can actually put it aside, and then you can, as you described, get in the car and drive, and you're just fine. Yeah. I mean, presence is not necessarily perfection.
No, not at all.
Ongoing practice. It's a training. It's you see. I mean, you may have muscles, but you still have to go to the gym.
Yeah.
Because if you don't, you lose them.
Yeah.
So.
And I don't think it was a silly thing. Oh, for me, I'm just being silly. I think this is your moment. This is a gift from God. This is like the angels fluttered down and like on they hand you this beautiful opportunity.
Yeah.
To be more free. And this is just me. I don't know if this is true, but I don't know that it was just your husband saying whatever he was saying, but also what that triggered in you. Some other puzzle piece of your ego that wasn't yet able to see the light, and there it was. Because of course you're not that person.
No, but you're right, Fred. There was something going on that said, I'm not good enough to own this car.
And that's what you get to really, I mean, you don't even have to call it that. Just the being with it and the experience of it is enough to change your life forever, at least in some small way.
Yeah. Yeah. And it was a transformative experience in that little space. So yeah, it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
So,
not at the time, but
yeah, of course not. Yes, but no excuses. No, I'm just kidding.
But
it's not about feel the fear and do it anyway. It's just about stop, take that pause, and just be with it. And notice what's going on. That's all.
That is such a good point, and that's actually something we could have as a Presence Posse topic.
Slow down.
Because there's a difference between feel the fear and do it anyway, and feel the fear and be with the fear.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally.
Or a third
when you
thing
need
could be
that, sometimes you need the one and sometimes you need the other, and neither of them is wrong. It's what you need in the moment, what is appropriate to the moment. But we don't want to start that topic because we're at the end of our hour. Sorry, did you ask me if you could say something else?
No, Bobby
started to say something and then.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It was about the next subject, so we'll save that for the next time. Hopefully the thing that people have gotten out of this, that we have the opportunity. There is an opportunity to change the relationship that we. Oh, I'm sorry. I do know what I wanted to say. I had a client recently, and since we're at the hour, I'll do the short version of this, who had a problem with the truth. His problem was not excuses. His problem was actually lying. And what he ended up being really good at was crafting these really elaborate excuses. And he'd kind of gotten found out, so it was starting to be a problem in his life. So we did some hypnosis, and it's something that he's been struggling with forever. And we went back to when he was 4, and he had bitten an apple, took one bite out of the apple, didn't like it, threw it in the garbage can. And his parents found that, and they were disappointed that he was wasting food. And they asked him about that, and he said, no, that wasn't me. Must have been David. And David wasn't around. And, so the parents were like putting pressure on him. And it was the first time that he recalls ever telling a lie. And he knows for a fact it was the first time he was ever called on the lie. But that created in him, like, the message that he took from that was, I need to cover all of my bases if I'm going to lie. Which is wisdom. That's true. If you are going to do that, it's smart. But at the same time, that's not a useful life strategy. And that's an extreme example of excuses. But I think on a smaller scale, this is an opportunity for us to, some excuses are very valid and they're just the reasons. And there is the opportunity to crawl out of the cab and still make the recital in time if you want to do that. Or there is the time to relax and just be with it and listen to the wisdom that it's telling you. Because sometimes that fear is also telling you, sometimes power through, sometimes sit with it and hear what the message is. Sometimes recognize that it might be telling you, it's not a good idea to go pet the bear, even though it looks super cute there eating that salmon. Sometimes fear is wisdom reaching for us as well. And those whispers are good to heed.
Generally, fear is wisdom. We are now at even gone over our hour, but that is not unusual for the Presence Posse.
And we make no excuses either.
Exactly.
It is what it is.
Presence and keeping time. Well, I thank all of the panelists for a rousing conversation about presence and excuses. And thank you to all of you who are watching, and especially to Rosalie, who allowed us to tease her. And we make no excuse for it. We don't have an official topic decided for next week, but
Maybe we
will be
presence and what was it?
Feeling the fear.
We're doing that, feeling the fear, acting on the fear.
Doing it anyway to come up with a better
doing it, not doing it.
Maybe we just call it presence and fear. We'll get back to you on that, y'all. But for now, we are the Presence Posse. We thank you very much. We look forward to seeing you again next Monday, same time, but we will be live and interactive on Zoom as we are on the last Monday of the month. So please feel free to join us on camera and on microphone for
come crash our party.
Something. Beg pardon?
Come crash our party.
Come crash our party. We invite you to crash our party.
Indeed.
Be there or be square. And I just realized I can't end this conversation because Bobby's doing tech for today. So Bobby has to do it.
So with that, I will say to our audience, ciao for now, and we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye-bye.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.